Begin by grabbing an empty point cloud. We're going to attach our ice tree to this point cloud and use scene objects to generate the instances and the emission data. I'm going to move right into an ice tree, so I'll switch my C viewport over to an ice tree, and I'll create an ice tree on my point cloud. I'm not going to create a simulated ice tree at the moment, just because we're not dealing with any movement. So just creating the trees themselves. So I'll create an ice tree. If I have a look at the mini show hide explorer, we have an ice tree operator dropped into the modeling stack of our point cloud. If I don't want the operator to be frozen at any point, I'm just going to move it up into the animation stack. At this point, we do not have a simulated ice tree, so the effects are going to be frame-based. So if I make changes by setting keyframes, I can change the values in the ice tree, but the previous frame does not provide the next frame with any additional information. There's no simulation data, so to speak. So I'll start off by getting an emit node. I need to emit these trees from this surface here. So I'll go into my tasks, drop down into the emitters set of tasks, and I'll emit from surface. So I'll drag the emit from surface compound into the scene, which is red right now, and I'm just going to do a few things to the emit from surface node so it behaves the way I need for something like trees. In the number of particles per second, I'm going to set the rate type to a total number of particles. I want to generate a specific number of trees, not a number of new particles or trees every second. I'll leave the rate fairly low for now, which may be at 50. And the shape isn't going to matter at the moment because I'm going to be replacing it with an instance node. So let's come back to shape in a moment. Of course, total number of particles, I'll make sure the speed is at 0, even though speed won't really have a factor because this isn't a simulated ice tree. I'll take the emit from surface and plug it into port 1 of the ice tree, and then I'll actually take the ground and use it as the emitter. Now the one thing we have to look at with the ground here is that it's made of a number of pieces. And if I did want some trees to grow along these pathways here, or along this pathway, I'd have to actually use two separate emitters. What I can do is a little cheat. I can actually just merge the ground geometry. If I just go and find it quickly, I'll switch to Objects Only, hit F. I've got the grassy area and the pathway. I could just merge those two objects together by switching to the model mode and creating a polymesh merge between the two, which creates a new polymesh object. I can actually call this my emitter. And this is going to remain hidden. So I could have just done that right from within the merge meshes operator. What I do want to do, however, is remove the merge meshes operation between the emitter object, the merged geo, and the originals. So I'll just hit freeze modeling. And if I just temporarily hide the grassy area and the pathway, which they are, just have a look at my Phong shader here. Okay, so that's the one. I could go in and add more geometry to it, giving me more choices of where and when to place trees. So this is not really ideal geometry. It's not really quadrangulated or anything. So I could go and run a polymesh quadrangulate on the whole thing to get rid of all the tries. I could kind of work the incidence angles to really take it down to quads as much as possible. Control the corner angle, deviation. Again, just little filters that help get rid of as many triangles as possible. So that looks pretty good now. And then from here, I'll freeze the operator and maybe do a little bit of subdivision on it. So I'll go in and try just subdividing the mesh, maybe 1 or 2 levels. If I alt right click, I'll add a subdivision to this mesh. So from there I could actually just freeze it. So now I have all of these as polygons to paint from. Okay, so in doing so, my emitter object is now this one, which I don't really need. This is my new emitter object, so we'll call that emitter. Get rid of the old emitter. And I'll hide my emitter object and bring back the grassy area and pathway. So we've just done a little bit of a cheat there. So I'm going to bring the emitter object into my graph and use it as the input for the emit from surface compound. So we'll get this, and I'll plug the emitter in right there. Now instantly, if I actually just move to frame 2, we can see particles appearing all over the hidden grid, which translates to looking like they're appearing obviously on our grassy grid here. If I start increasing the number of particles, we have points on our grid from which to grow our trees. So we've got another part of the problem solved. Points to grow the trees from, and we're going to look at maybe removing some of the points from their positions on this grid. For example, I don't necessarily want a lot of trees growing along the pathway here, so I can paint that area out if I don't want trees to grow up along the pathway, or even up through the houses for that matter. So I'll just leave my number of particles high. This actually would give me a great idea of whether or not particles are growing in those areas, and we'll look at solving this problem of removing particles.